Madam Speaker, I proudly rise today to deliver my own response to Fiji's 2018-2019 budget. As Prime Minister, I fully recognize that the thoughts which I share in this August Parliament over the next 20 minutes will attract a great deal of attention. And as the leader of the Fiji First Party, I am also keenly aware that the spotlight shines even brighter during an election year. Madam Speaker, the words that will be spoken by members of Parliament today and throughout the week will be amplified louder and projected further than any year in Fijian history. My government's targeted investments have vastly and permanently expanded telecommunications all throughout Fiji, even in our most deep rural and maritime communities. Paired with booming economic prosperity that has put technology in the home and hands of Fijian families throughout our country, our nation's access to information is at an all-time high. But, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, even the proudest of accomplishments can be abused by responsible actors. With great access to information can come the great spread of falsehoods. Madam Speaker, I know that many Fijians put their trust in me as Prime Minister to cut through that fog of falsehood to find the truth. Many, Madam Speaker, look to me more than anyone to provide a straightforward and honest assessment of the state of affairs in Fiji. This humbling responsibility is not one I take lightly. And with more Fijians than ever watching on their TV or smartphone, listening on the radio, and getting news in the papers and online, this is a duty that I very consciously carry on my shoulders this morning. Madam Speaker, to those Fijians who are seeking my judgment of the 2018-2019 national budget, it is quite simple. The budget is responsible. Oh, I forgot, Madam Speaker, even the leader of the opposition has endorsed the budget. You'll probably find, Madam Speaker, that she's already changed her mind. And the one thing that the opposition is well known for is their inconsistency in everything they talk about. But this is a budget, Madam Speaker, that will move our nation forward. This is the budget for all Fijian families. By the breadth of my experience and through the wisdom this experience has blessed me with, I can say this with full confidence. Because, Madam Speaker, this isn't a one-off budget during an election year. It is all part of my government's visionary plan. It is one building block on top of the great pillar of progress that we have already constructed. This budget, Madam Speaker, has been expertly engineered by the Attorney General and Minister for Economy to further raise the quality of life for Fijians of all ages today, while also preparing our nation for tomorrow. I applaud the hard work and many grueling hours put in not only by him, but by all those who contributed to ensuring this budget was carefully crafted. From the public and private sector input, but most especially from his staff, the Permanent Secretary for Economy and her officials. It is a remarkable achievement that we should all be proud of. Madam Speaker, when it comes to putting together a budget or running an economy, the moral compass of any government should be guided by one defining virtue, and that is responsibility. This is a theme at the core of my remarks today. It is how we can distinguish whether politicians are governing for their people or governing for themselves. It is the difference between long-sighted leadership and short-sighted spinelessness. Because, Madam Speaker, true leaders are concerned with preserving prosperity far after they've gone. False leaders are concerned only with preserving themselves. Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to address the criticisms of the opposition head-on. First, it is important to note that valid and fair critics of government are invaluable to a democracy. They ensure that our elected officials remain self-aware and accountable, and they can add constructive perspective that better informs our policy and decision-making. Meanwhile, Madam Speaker, there is a fundamental difference between criticism that is just versus the blatant and desperate lies that we have seen coming from the opposition.
Shame.
Madam Speaker, the worst offender is the leader of SODELPA, Bainimarama. He is the leader of SODELPA. In a desperate bid to reclaim power, he has quickly resorted to spreading falsehoods as his only political strategy. That's the only political strategy that he knows of. It would seem that the only truth that has come out of Rambuka's mouth in recent weeks was when, just last week, he described his own party's leader in parliament as irresponsible. And as SODELPA's infighting only seems to get worse, Fijian.
Madam Speaker, the leader of SODELPA, Mr. Bainimarama, is not in the House and should not be brought up in the manner that the Honorable Prime Minister has said in his response, and should concentrate on the budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I did allow the mention of the leader of SODELPA at this time, because what is being said is already in the media and everybody knows about it. Thank you.
I represent your policies. It's your policy. It's your policy.
We give you extra time.
Now we're talking about the budget. Madam Speaker, I want to say if Rambuka wants to see the height of irresponsibility, he need only look into a mirror. The lies that he tells, his falsehoods, are intentionally designed to confuse and scare the public. A prime example of this, Madam Speaker, is when he chose to lie in front of the world on an Australian news program, a calculated move that he hoped would make Fiji look foolish and weak, all for his own celebrity and political benefit. In his typical dramatic fashion, he declared to the cameras that Fiji risks selling our souls by handing over control of government assets like our ports and jetties to the Chinese. But
No understanding of finance.
as it turns out, Madam Speaker, the real assets being handed over are Rambuka's. You didn't hear that, Tuna Taltala. We learned just last week, Madam Speaker, that he himself sold off his personal estate in Voreqe to a Chinese businessman. Madam Speaker, you can't make this stuff up. But while we may laugh, no one should see the irresponsible lies and hypocrisy as comical. Fijians need to see this behavior for what it truly is. It is a pattern, it is outrageous, and it is dangerous. While Rambuka's sensationalization makes headlines, it certainly doesn't make good leadership. If SODELPA knew a single thing about responsible fiscal management, they would know that Fiji stands absolutely no risk of losing our economic independence to China or to Japan or to any other country, for that matter, that they try to use for their fear-mongering tactics. Madam Speaker, as the Honorable Attorney General has pointed out, we actually have a profit or operating surplus, taking in more revenue than we spend when it comes to the day-to-day running of government. Every extra dollar we take, it is spent on capital investment for the benefit of our people, which is then complemented by strategic loans for further capital projects. Absolutely every dollar borrowed by government is used to invest back into our people. We use it for infrastructure spending, we use it for climate adaptation, expanding education, and providing medical services. If we were not to do this, our people would suffer, and Fiji would forever remain underdeveloped, left behind in a global economy. Recognizing the need for this infrastructure spending, international institutions and financial experts have praised our budget as responsible. Just last week, ANZ international economist Kirsty Sen said that our continued growth streak is remarkable, especially considering how often we are hit with economically devastating tropical cyclones like Winston, which cost over $1 billion in damages. These international bodies, from ANZ to World Bank to IMF and Moody's, aren't driven by a political agenda. They are driven by objective facts. And that's a concern, Madam Speaker, because this morning you hear Honorable Randondo talk about this side of the House, especially the Minister for Economy, manipulating the figures. The figures are taken from IMF, the Reserve, World Bank. I don't know where they're going to pack their figures from. I hope it's not from under the table somewhere, because that seems to be the norm with the opposition. But Madam Speaker, when you look at the charts, one factor stands out as having an even more devastating effect on the Fijian economy than cyclones. That factor is Sitiveni Rambuka. The Fijian economy suffered its biggest blow in history after his 1987 coup. It contracted by 6.4%. Yet Rambuka chooses to manipulate Fiji's statistics to his advantage, with flippant disregard for the facts. But Madam Speaker, while desperate politicians may lie, numbers don't. The false economic figures that Rambuka touts are at best a gross manipulation. He openly brags that the Fijian economy grew by 4.2% under SBT leadership. Meanwhile, when you do the math, the average growth during full years that SBT was in power, the rate stands at only around half of what he claims, 2.3%. I think, Madam Speaker, I should stop relying on bad economic advice from second-rate former civil servants. Madam Speaker, SODELPA's economic ignorance extends further as they spread misinformation about Fiji's inflation rate. Rambuka has suggested that our domestic inflation is somehow out of control, harming the purchasing power of Fijians. Again, this is a flat lie. His shameless hypocrisy is exposed again as SODELPA campaigns for an immediate jump to the $4 minimum wage with no regard for the inflation it would ignite. Where did $4 even come from? Between this and NFP's $5 proposed wage, the opposition seems to be pulling numbers out of thin air with no regard to the 130,000 Fijians working in the informal sector and consequential inflationary impact. But like when it comes to selling assets to the Chinese, Rambuka need not look further than his own backyard to find the real truth. His irresponsible actions and terrible economic mismanagement are the single biggest contributor to domestic inflation that Fiji has ever seen. Madam Speaker, after he executed his coups in 1987, the Fijian dollar was hit with two large devaluations, draining the pockets of Fijian families everywhere. And a third devaluation came under his SBT regime in 1998. Combined, the three Rambuka currency devaluations wiped off more than half the value of the Fijian dollar. To the many ordinary Fijians who saw their life savings go up in smoke, this, combined with the collapse of the National Bank of Fiji during his time, will go down in our nation's history as Fiji's single largest financial disaster. And now, Honorable Nondono is talking about changing the performance of the FNPF, which will kill the FNPF. He doesn't know, he knows little about what the FNPF does. Madam Speaker, Sudelpa's chorus of lies is joined by Fiji Labour Party and the National Federation Party, as they are all guilty of manipulating facts to mislead you, think that the poverty rate in Fiji stands at around 50%. The distortion is despicable. The reality is that poverty has been on a decline, steady decline over the past decade, shrinking from 35% to 31% to 28% in 2014. A new survey will be conducted this year, with all signs pointing to that rate to continue downward trend. And while the backdated survey that the opposition selectively quotes, their scare tactics completely ignore the significant economic progress that Fiji has achieved in recent years. To suggest that poverty is on the rise when every day we see more Fijians joining the job market and buying homes and cars is blind to the reality of our ongoing progress. And sadly, Madam Speaker, these are just lies that the opposition is willing to say publicly. But behind a bowl of grog, or disguised by a fake profile on Facebook, their true character is exposed. We know that when certain parties are off the record and trying to win votes with fear instead of facts, the lies are much uglier, much more toxic, and much more openly racist and religiously chauvinistic. Madam Speaker, when their lies about the budget of Fiji's economic performance fail to gain any traction, the opposition seems to rely on a common fallback, rambling on about handouts to anyone who cares to listen. Honorable Biman Prasad thinks he can see far into the future, Madam Speaker, because he already labeled this year's budget as a package of handouts long before it was announced. I'd like to put an end to this, Madam Speaker. If the out-of-touch opposition would take the time to look up from their plate of buttered lamb chops and beer and actually see the needs of Fijian families, they would realize that calling government's initiative handouts is an insult to Fijian families. It is an insult to Fijian families to call government initiative as handout. It is irresponsible and it is wrong. Madam Speaker, as our critics are speaking to a camera or typing behind a computer screen, it is both cowardly and irresponsible for them to portray Fijians who receive assistance as lazy, as less than, or is dependent on government's tip. But I have a feeling that if they visit with Fijian families face to face, their tone will quickly change. I understand, Madam Speaker, there was some cake shared last night. It is Honorable Ngavoka's birthday. We were informed by the Minister for Economy that it was celebrated last night, and we were hoping some piece of a cake would come, but obviously not. But speaking of cake, Madam Speaker, I get the impression that the opposition want to have their cake and eat it too. They're complaining about the budget, how much we spend, the handouts that supposedly be given to the public at large, but they're not telling themselves to move away from handouts. They're not telling their families to come away from freebies. They're not telling their supporters that they should go away from free school fees and free bus fares. So really, Madam Speaker, they are a bit inconsistent in what they want to talk about when they talk about our economy. Madam Speaker, to the 70-year-old vegetable farmer from Singatoka, whose livelihood was washed away by TC Josie's floodwaters, I dare the opposition to call the fertilizer and seedlings he received from our farms care program a handout. To the Fijian schoolgirl living in deep rural Honolulu, the first in her family's history to receive a formal education, reading a free math textbook under the light of government-subsidized electricity, I dare the opposition to call the opportunities at her feet handouts. To the grandmother living with diabetes in Lani, who is struggling to meet the cost of her treatments, I dare the opposition to call the government-subsidized dialysis that she will receive at one of Fiji's soon-to-open kidney centers a handout. To the mourning widow in Notoka, whose financial struggles would have once forced her to choose between a proper burial for her husband or Christmas gifts for children, I dare the opposition to call the payments she received from government's new family insurance a handout. To the tertiary student studying engineering in Suva, who comes from a low-income family, relying on his increased bus fare subsidy to get to and from class every day and accessing his assignments online using a new free Wi-Fi hotspot, I dare the opposition to belittle his government assistance as a handout. To the mother of a newborn boy in Nandi who would have once needed to worry about taking unpaid time off work to care for her baby and would struggle to pay for nappies and formula, I dare the opposition to call her extended maternity leave and a parallel decision a handout. To the Fijian Nosori who was able to break through the generational cycle of poverty by turning a green thumb into a nursery business that now employs 3 staff, I dare the opposition to call the plants and tools she purchased with a micro and small business grant a handout. To the young Fijian boy living with a disability in Lambasa who struggles to move his wheelchair from the bedroom to the bathroom and whose house constructed without his needs in mind never truly felt like a home, I dare the opposition to call the new ramp and structural upgrades he received from the budget a handout. The family in Ba, Madam Speaker, who saw their home and all their possessions destroyed by a mudslide during Cyclone Kenny, I dare the opposition to call the construction materials they purchased through home cares a handout. Madam Speaker, I think I made it quite clear. My government and this budget doesn't give handouts. It gives Fijians of all walks of life a leg up. It helps Fijian families to help themselves. As I said, it is a building block in a larger vision for a prosperous Fiji. Madam Speaker, it takes a profound amount of skill to put together a national budget that maintains a delicate balance of fiscal responsibility while still providing the most benefit possible back to the Fijian people. This budget accomplishes that balance with prudent craftsmanship and economic experience. And Madam Speaker, this responsible family budget is a budget that could only be accomplished by Fiji First. This budget is a clear example of how my government leads and how we will continue to lead to ensure all Fijians have a brighter future. All Fijians must consider this fact during this week's debates and in the critical months ahead. Thank you, Madam Speaker.